Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're exploring a fascinating but often overlooked cognitive bias, simple, pain-avoiding psychological denial. This is one of the most common mental traps that Charlie Munger discusses in Poor Charlie's Almanack. And yet most people don't even realize when they're falling into it. At its core, this tendency is about avoiding painful truths. When reality is too uncomfortable, too threatening, or too difficult to accept, the human mind often takes a shortcut. It simply denies it. Instead of confronting facts head-on, people convince themselves that things aren't as bad as they seem, that problems will resolve on their own, or that the future will magically align with their wishes. This is a defense mechanism, a way for the brain to reduce stress. And while it can provide short-term comfort, in the long run, it almost always leads to poor decisions, lost opportunities, and even disaster. This pattern of denial plays out in investing, business, health, relationships, and even entire societies. It causes people to ignore obvious warning signs, avoid difficult but necessary changes, and cling to beliefs that no longer serve them. And the consequences can be devastating. One of the most dangerous places where denial operates is in the world of investing. Investors often refuse to accept when an investment is failing, holding on to losing stocks long after they should have sold. Instead of cutting their losses, they engage in wishful thinking, telling themselves that things will turn around. A perfect example of this was the housing market crash of 2008. Leading up to the crisis, home prices were skyrocketing, and financial institutions were giving out risky subprime loans with little regard for whether borrowers could actually repay them. Many people refused to believe that a housing bubble was forming, despite clear signs that prices were unsustainable. Even when home values started dropping, banks, investors, and homeowners clung to the illusion that the market would recover quickly. Instead of accepting reality and making rational decisions, they remained in denial until the bubble finally burst, leading to one of the worst financial crises in history. A more recent example is the rise and fall of WeWork. In its early days, WeWork was hailed as one of the most promising startups, valued at nearly $47 billion. Investors poured money into it despite the fact that the company had no clear path to profitability and was burning through cash at an unsustainable rate. But instead of acknowledging the red flags, many people remained in denial. They bought into the vision that WeWork was the future of office spaces, ignoring fundamental financial issues. When reality finally caught up, WeWork's valuation collapsed, and the company had to be bailed out to avoid bankruptcy. Denial isn't just a problem in investing, it destroys businesses too. Many companies have failed because their leadership refused to acknowledge shifting market trends, changing consumer behavior, or internal weaknesses. A classic case of this was BlackBerry. At one point, BlackBerry was the dominant player in the smartphone market. But when Apple introduced the iPhone, the world changed. Consumers wanted touchscreens, app stores, and a sleek user experience. Instead of adapting, BlackBerry stayed in denial. They insisted that physical keyboards were superior, refused to innovate, and dismissed Apple's rise as a temporary trend. By the time they finally realized their mistake, it was too late. The smartphone market had moved on, and BlackBerry was left behind. Another well-known example is General Motors. For decades, GM was America's biggest car manufacturer. But in the early 2000s, the company was losing ground to foreign competitors like Toyota and Honda. Consumers wanted more fuel-efficient, reliable cars. But GM was stuck in the past, still focused on selling gas-guzzling vehicles. Instead of acknowledging their outdated business model, GM's leadership ignored the warning signs, continued producing vehicles that fewer people wanted, and avoided making necessary changes. Eventually, the company collapsed into bankruptcy in 2009, requiring a massive government bailout to survive. This same pattern of denial shows up in personal life as well. People stay in toxic relationships because they don't want to face the truth. They tell themselves, things will get better, or they didn't mean it, even when all the evidence suggests otherwise. Many people also deny health problems. Someone might ignore chronic fatigue, weight gain, or early symptoms of disease, convincing themselves that it's nothing serious. They delay going to the doctor because they don't want to face the possibility of bad news. But in reality, ignoring health issues only makes them worse. Denial is especially dangerous in politics and society. Throughout history, civilizations have ignored warning signs about economic downturns, environmental destruction, or rising political instability. Instead of taking action, people convince themselves that things will work out on their own until they don't. Why does this happen? Because the human brain is wired for comfort. Accepting hard truths takes mental effort and emotional resilience. Admitting that you were wrong, that you made a bad investment, or that your beliefs need to change is painful. And so, most people take the easy way out. They pretend the problem doesn't exist. But denial never changes reality. It only delays the inevitable. And the longer you deny reality, the worse the consequences become. So how do you avoid falling into psychological denial? The first step is self-awareness. You have to train yourself to recognize when you're avoiding reality. Whenever you catch yourself thinking, this can't be happening or it'll all work out somehow, take a step back and ask, am I avoiding a hard truth? Another key strategy is seeking diverse perspectives. One of the reasons Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger have been so successful is because they actively seek out dissenting opinions. They don't surround themselves with people who agree with them. They invite criticism because they know that clear thinking requires challenging their own assumptions. You can also fight denial by practicing intellectual humility. Be willing to change your mind when presented with new evidence. The best thinkers in history, from scientists to investors to business leaders, all share this ability. They don't cling to old ideas just because they're comfortable. They adapt, adjust, and evolve. And finally, always focus on long-term thinking. Psychological denial often happens because people prioritize short-term comfort over long-term success. But the best decisions are made by those who see reality clearly and act accordingly. Charlie Munger has often said that facing reality head-on is one of the greatest competitive advantages in life. The sooner you confront reality, whether in investing, business, health, or relationships, the better your decisions will be. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into cognitive biases, mental models, and decision-making strategies inspired by Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett. Thanks for watching, and until next time, think rationally, act wisely, and embrace reality.